On this week's show, former Georgia Southern softball standout A.J. Hamilton taking swings at a different kind of ball as she tries to make the U.S. national women's baseball team, and the annual Georgia Southern Women's Football Clinic taking place at Paulson Stadium. All that and more as we welcome you inside the Eagles Nest.
Eagles came to fight if they're blue, white. Eagles came to fight if they're blue.
And welcome inside the Eagles Nest. I'm your host, Josh Aubrey, being joined by Mike Anthony, sports editor and Georgia Southern beat writer for the Statesboro Herald. And Mike, once again, we're in the midst of summer. We've got football coming up just in the horizon, but right now we still have a couple of weeks before we really get into things. Do have a couple of stories to get to this week, but let's begin with something that's coming up next week, and that is down in New Orleans. You're going to be heading for the Sunbelt Media Day. You were there last year. Of course, this will be Tyson Summers' first chance to meet with the media members in the Sunbelt and get those questions over and over and over. We know how this thing works. Your thoughts on Media Day and what kind of things do you expect down in New Orleans?
Well, I expect to have a good time. As you mentioned, I think that Coach Summers might have it rougher than anyone. Coming in as a first-year head coach, you're always going to get a little more attention than usual, especially when you are the coach of Georgia Southern, who's right in the middle of one of the most successful transitions from FCS to FBS there is. Everything was going fine. Now they're going to have to prove that they can do it through a coaching change. Once again, I'm sure that Coach Summers is going to get awful tired of fielding questions about, will they run the option? How much option will they run? How much will they pass? The same things that he's been answering from guys like me and Josh since the spring. So he might be on autopilot there a little bit with some of the questions. I, on the other hand, am looking forward to getting my finger on the pulse of the rest of the conference. Georgia Southern, kind of a question mark going into last year, wondering if they could keep up the success. They proved that they could do it on the field, even when everybody knew exactly what they were getting into when they took on the Eagles. So I'm kind of interested to see in this year, too, if some of those coaches that were still on the fence last year talking about Georgia Southern really appreciate what the Eagles are doing for the conference and what they can expect whenever they pop up on the schedule.
A couple of new coaches. You have one down at Texas State, one here at Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern with a few opponents that they're going to be playing this year for the first time, and a couple of teams that have kind of maybe insinuated that they would have liked to have played Georgia Southern. Well, now's your opportunity for Lafayette, for Arkansas State. Going to be interesting to see what those guys say about playing Georgia Southern this time around, because it's finally coming. Both of those games, midweek games, which makes it a little interesting as well, a Wednesday and a Thursday evening game. We also have Coastal Carolina, so there's a lot of different things coming up this year as far as the Media Day goes that I'm sure you're going to be asking questions about.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to get the take of those schools, Arkansas State and Louisiana Lafayette, namely. They were the two guys running the show 2 years ago when Appalachian State and Georgia Southern came into the conference. Since then, I think anybody who's being unbiased or anyone from outside of the conference who's looking in, you've got to put those two newcomers ahead of those two teams right now. Granted, Arkansas State won the conference last year, was undefeated, put a pretty good beating on Appalachian State, but they lose a lot of talent. They lose a quarterback who was an all-conference talent. They've bounced back in the past. They're sure that they can do it again, and I know that after a couple of years ago, Georgia Southern fans can't wait to get them in Jonesboro on that Wednesday night. They don't want to hear about how Georgia Southern lucked out with their schedule 2 years ago. Both teams figure to be right at the top of the standings around that time of year. Could shape up to be a good one. Maybe we'll get a few comments a couple months in advance.
Coastal Carolina, of course, the other new member coming in to the Sun Belt, which will help to make it possible to have the championship game that we heard about a few years ago is finally coming up. Of course, Coastal Carolina's baseball team goes out, wins the national championship. Football, it's going to be, I think, a little bit tougher transition for them, but they've got some talent. They have a coach who's pretty well known, maybe more so for his pocketbook than anything else. Your thoughts on Coastal coming in and what kind of questions you plan on asking them?
Well, I think it has all the potential of being a strong addition to the Sun Belt. Obviously, never hurts to get a national champion in there. The funny thing, if they would have waited one more day to do it, they would have been official Sun Belt members on July 1st. If that game could have just been postponed a little bit, the Sun Belt might have been able to glom a little bit off of that national championship. But either way, all the sports except for football coming in for Coastal Carolina. this season. We'll talk more about that in the fall and in the winter when the Chanticleers start popping up on the schedule. But for football, it'll be interesting to see how they handle this transition. They were a brand new team just about a decade ago. They quickly rose up through the ranks of FCS, maybe helped out a little bit by not having the likes of Georgia Southern and Appalachian State to deal with in the playoffs, but they've turned themselves into a power perennial top 10 the last few years, making it all the way up to our old friends at North Dakota State a couple of times and figuring out that they haven't quite reached the top of that mountain. But with all the energy around that program right now, with the continued success at the FCS level, I think they have just as much a chance as anybody to continue that and get off to a strong start in a couple of years.
All right, well, shifting gears a little bit, had a little fun event that seems to be Georgia Southern tradition over the last few years, and that is a women's football clinic that was taking place over at Paulson Stadium. I know you didn't get a chance to get out there and cover it, but your thoughts on having a women's clinic and maybe enlightening some to football that may not have already known much?
Well, it's always fun to kind of get people out of their comfort zone, and honestly, I don't know how out of your comfort zone it is for a lot of the participants here. This is Georgia Southern. People take their football seriously. I've run across plenty of girls when I was in school, ladies that I talk to now that can dissect a play just as well as I can. So for some of them, I think it might just be a thrill to get out on the field where, they probably wouldn't be allowed on a Saturday, but to get out there and jump over some bags, throw some balls around, that's always fun. But in the end, I think that what it really feeds into is tailgating season just around the corner. Georgia Southern knows how to throw a party, and this is just kind of getting the party started a little earlier and a chance for the coaching staff to really mingle with some of its biggest supporters and fans.
And that's exactly what was happening. Let's get out and hear from another Coach Summers. Beth Summers was kind of heading this thing up, and a couple of the participants.
Oh, it's awesome. It's so much fun, and I've learned a lot. I took notes and everything else, and just getting to meet a lot of other fans and everything, too, is a lot of fun. Getting to meet the coaches and the coaches' wives and see all the facilities. It's wonderful. We already have not only a season ticket cheer, but we already have room reservations to go to all the away games and everything, too. So I am just a lover of Georgia Southern football.
I think it's a good chance to meet some of the other ladies of Eagle football, and for the ladies to learn a little bit about football. I, of course, know a little bit, not enough, but just a good time and good fellowship. We were in the offensive meeting room, and some of the ladies were asking questions that I was even like, oh man, like, I was really surprised by some of the questions. So yeah, I think women today are figuring out they need to know a little bit more about football than the men do, so.
Well, Mike, the Georgia Southern softball team making a pretty good transition into the Sun Belt. The first year, a little bit rocky start, but we know how tough the Sun Belt is in softball, and a couple of teams making it to the College World Series. Georgia Southern upset the top team in the league this year at home. In that game, A.J. Hamilton, the catcher for Georgia Southern, a senior this year, hit a home run and helped the Eagles to the victory. And now she's off to bigger and better things on the diamond, but this time she's not throwing a softball, but rather a baseball. Pretty neat story for her as she's become a person who's trying to make the U.S. national baseball team.
Well, we're used to talking baseball this time of year. We're used to talking Eagles transitioning into professional baseball this time of year. Can't say I've ever had the discussion about a former softball player doing it, but why not this year? A little bit of a quiet year in the MLB draft for the Eagles, just one player selected. Jordan Wren will be back next year. So let's go to softball. A.J. Hamilton able to get the attention of, I guess, the best of the best in the entire country at a tryout last month in North Carolina. Impressed enough to make it to the final round of cuts. She'll go out to California, see if she can't make that final squad, who's going to be able to go overseas and show that the guys can definitely go overseas and compete. The girls can too.
All right, well, we had a chance to talk with A.J. Hamilton about her experience and her thoughts about making the U.S. national baseball team.
Went to a softball factory camp, and one of the coaches there kind of introduced me to the idea that there was even a women's national team available. And then this past season, Coach Annie Smith at Georgia Southern, she really kind of got me in with the contacts and kind of helped me along in the process, and as far as knowing when tryouts are, how to go about that, and stuff like that. I knew that there was a potential that I could possibly go play, but I didn't really know what I was getting into until I got to tryouts and kind of saw all the other athletes. And then once I kind of saw where I stood, I felt pretty confident that I was going to be able to perform at a high level. I think the hardest transition for me was how big the field was. You know, running to first base, you got an extra 30 feet on there. You know, a single isn't just a single, it's, you know, it's a little bit more than that. And I think the distance of the field, how big it is, and then also the angle of the ball coming in. Having an overhand pitcher is definitely something that you have to adjust to from going from softball to baseball. I think catching has helped me. You know, with softball, you have to read spin just like you do baseball. So I think being able to see high-level pitchers, catching high-level pitchers in softball who have had great spin, I feel like that has helped me in baseball because I'm able to read it a little bit easier. I feel really, really good. I go to the gym every day. They sent me a workout packet, so if I'm not doing the workout packet, then I'm working on, you know, little stuff here and there. I try and get in a cage, you know, 4 or 5 times a week and make sure I'm long tossing, getting my arm strength up, but just, you know, putting in something every day to get better. I will be traveling to California in August. I will have another series of tryouts there, and then I will know on August 25th if I will be traveling to South Korea for the World Cup.
And that'll wrap it up for this week. For Mike Anthony, I'm Josh Aubrey. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you again next week.